This was not just another disappearance. From the very first hours, the story carried elements that would shock the conscience of the world. A child left sleeping in an unlocked apartment, a window mysteriously open, no signs of forced entry, and a mother's desperate scream piercing the night air. "They've taken her!" In that single moment, chaos erupted, and what began as panic among friends quickly spiraled into an international crisis that no one could have predicted. Since that night, countless questions have circled endlessly. Who took Madeleine? Was it a stranger lurking in the shadows, or someone much closer than anyone dared to imagine? Why did the investigation stumble in its earliest and most critical hours? And how, after years of suspicion, accusations, and shifting narratives, has justice still not been served? The disappearance of Madeleine McCann is more than just a crime story. It is a tale of parental grief, media obsession, international conflict, and the unsettling flaws of systems meant to protect the innocent. To this day, there are no clear answers, only fragments of truth buried beneath years of speculation and failure. And as we revisit the events of that night, the deeper tragedy emerges, not only the loss of a little girl, but the loss of trust in institutions we expect to safeguard our children. The McCann family had traveled from the United Kingdom to Portugal in early May 2007 for what was supposed to be a relaxing getaway. Along with a group of close friends, 3 other couples with children, they booked apartments at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz. The group would later be referred to in the media as the Tapas 7. Their days were spent between the pool, the beach, and the simple routines of young families. Their evenings, however, were reserved for dinners together at the resort's tapas restaurant, just a short walk away. The McCanns were staying in apartment 5A, located on the ground floor of one of the resort's whitewashed blocks. The flat had 2 main entry points, a front door facing the street and a sliding glass patio door at the back, opening into a small garden that led to the pool and restaurant area. The back entrance, easy and discreet, became their preferred way in and out. Inside, 3 children slept. Madeleine, just 3 years old, lay in the same bedroom as her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amelie. She was the eldest, playful and curious, instantly recognizable by a rare mark in her right eye, a coloboma that made her iris unique. Kate and Jerry McCann, both physicians, she a general practitioner, he a cardiologist, seemed responsible and organized. But that night, a single decision would shadow them forever. Around 8:30 p.m., after bathing and putting the children to bed, they left the apartment unlocked and walked to dinner with their friends. Though the distance was roughly 100 meters, their table had no direct view of apartment 5A. Still, the adults reassured themselves with a system. Each parent would take turns checking the children at intervals of 15 to 30 minutes. At 9:05 p.m., Jerry McCann got up from the table and walked back to the apartment. Everything appeared normal. He saw Madeleine asleep, the twins resting peacefully. Relieved, he returned to dinner, confident their system was working. At 9:30 p.m., family friend Matthew Oldfield offered to check on the McCann children while doing his own rounds. Instead of entering the bedroom, however, he only glanced in from the hallway. All seemed quiet. He did not notice whether Madeleine was in her bed. Then, at 10:00 p.m., Kate McCann walked to the apartment for her turn. As she approached, unease grew. The bedroom door, usually left slightly ajar, was wide open. Inside, the window above Madeleine's bed was open, the shutters raised, and the curtain billowed in the night air. Madeleine's bed was empty. The twins remained asleep, undisturbed. Kate froze, then rushed back to the restaurant, her scream tearing through the evening silence. "They've taken her!" Panic erupted. Friends split up to search the grounds, running through corridors, around the pool, and toward the beach. Resort staff and other guests joined in, but no sign of Madeleine was found. At 10:30 p.m., the Ocean Club management contacted local police, who arrived just before 11 p.m. Neighbors were awakened, dogs were brought in, and more than 60 people combed the surrounding streets and alleys. Despite the frantic search, by midnight there was still no trace of the child. Back inside apartment 5A, troubling signs appeared. The window, rarely opened during the family's stay, stood ajar. The shutter had been lifted but showed no marks of forced entry. The room remained oddly undisturbed, the twins still asleep, as if nothing had happened. It was a disappearance without noise, without a struggle, and apparently without witnesses. That night, What should have been another ordinary evening on holiday turned into the beginning of one of the most enduring mysteries of modern times. And from the very first moments, the seeds of doubt, suspicion, and controversy began to take root. When officers from the Portuguese National Republican Guard arrived at the Ocean Club just before 11 p.m., Madeleine had already been missing for nearly an hour. In cases of child abduction, experts call this the golden window, the crucial first hours when evidence is fresh, witnesses' memories are sharp, and escape routes can still be closed. But in Praia da Luz, that opportunity slipped away almost immediately. The police response was slow and disorganized. Officers on duty in the quiet resort town had no specialized training in abductions, no child protection units, and no rapid response protocol. Their initial efforts consisted of walking through nearby streets and bushes with flashlights, while the apartment remained open to anyone who entered. Instead of being sealed and treated as a crime scene, Apartment 5A quickly became a revolving door. Friends, neighbors, staff, even strangers walked in and out in a collective panic. They hugged Kate to comfort her, touched furniture, moved curtains, even sat on Madeleine's bed. In doing so, they unknowingly erased what might have been the most crucial traces of evidence. By morning, the scene was contaminated beyond repair. No fingerprints were preserved, no DNA swabs were taken, and the open window, possibly the point of entry or exit, went unexamined for hours. The very place that could have held the answers was instead reduced to speculation. Meanwhile, confusion spread among investigators. Some officers believed Madeleine had wandered off on her own. Others theorized she might have been taken temporarily and would be returned. This hesitation meant that no roadblocks were set up that night. No alerts were issued at border crossings, and no surveillance of airports or ferries was requested. Within hours, the chance to stop a potential abductor from leaving the region, or even the country, was gone. As British officials and the McCann family pressed for more aggressive action, cultural and procedural differences widened the gap. In the UK, missing children cases were handled with immediate forensic preservation, phone record triangulation, CCTV retrieval, and press coordination. But in Portugal, investigations required judicial oversight and followed slower, more formal procedures. What should have been a joint effort turned into parallel investigations that rarely aligned. And then, the press descended. British tabloids painted Portuguese police as incompetent, while Portuguese newspapers began hinting that the parents themselves were suspicious. With details leaking from both sides, some official, others anonymous, the investigation quickly transformed into a media war. Every theory, every rumor, every mistake was amplified on front pages across Europe. In those early days, the cracks in the investigation were already widening into chasms, and as the search stumbled forward, the next twist would prove even more devastating. Suspicion began to shift from the shadows toward the very people who had cried out for help, Madeleine's own parents. By late summer of 2007, just months after Madeleine's disappearance, the direction of the investigation took a startling turn. On August 11th, Portuguese authorities officially declared Kate and Jerry McCann are Guidos, legal suspects under their judicial system. What had begun as a desperate search for a missing child was now reframed as a potential case of parental involvement. The shift was triggered in part by the introduction of specially trained sniffer dogs flown in from the United Kingdom. These cadaver and blood detection dogs alerted inside apartment 5A, near the wardrobe and behind a sofa, and later, in the trunk of a rental car the McCanns had hired weeks after Madeleine vanished. To investigators, the dog's behavior seemed to suggest the presence of human blood and the scent of decomposition. For the media, it was explosive. Headlines screamed of forensic breakthroughs and a hidden family secret. But beneath the noise, the evidence was far from conclusive. No DNA results could definitively link any of the samples to Madeleine. No body had been found. No eyewitness had placed the McCanns in any incriminating scenario. The alerts from the dogs were circumstantial at best. Yet, in the eyes of a public already torn between empathy and doubt, suspicion quickly hardened into judgment. The scrutiny on Kate and Jerry intensified. Their composure during interviews was seen by some as cold and calculated, while moments of raw emotion were dismissed as staged. Why did they leave their children alone that night? Why were they appearing so frequently in the media? Were they fighting for their daughter or managing their reputation? Every action, every word, every glance became fuel for speculation. Inside, the McCanns were breaking apart. Kate later wrote in her memoir that it felt as though they were being investigated instead of being helped. Their requests to access police files, witness interviews, and call records were repeatedly denied. Trust between them and the authorities fractured. And as the parents became the focus of inquiry, resources that might have been devoted to chasing down leads elsewhere were diverted to building a case against them. The damage was profound. Public sympathy began to erode. The couple's every move was debated across television panels, newspapers, and online forums. For some, they remained the image of devastated parents clinging to hope. For others, they became the face of suspicion. The real abductor, if one existed, had more time to vanish into the shadows. It was a devastating paradox. In searching for answers, the investigation had turned inward, trapping the McCanns in a spotlight of doubt, while the trail leading to their missing daughter grew colder by the day. With the official investigation faltering and suspicion weighing heavily on their shoulders, Kate and Jerry McCann decided to take matters into their own hands. They could not allow their daughter's name to fade into silence. Within weeks, they launched a massive international campaign to keep Madeleine's image alive in the public eye. It became one of the most extensive missing child awareness efforts the world had ever seen. Posters bearing Madeleine's wide eyes and small smile, with the distinctive mark in her iris, were distributed in airports, train stations, and supermarkets across Europe and beyond. The family launched a website, Find Madeleine, translated into multiple languages to gather donations, tips, and global awareness. They stood before cameras, held press conferences, and even traveled to other countries, meeting with political leaders and advocacy groups. Their message was simple but relentless: do not forget Madeleine. The campaign quickly gathered momentum. Donations poured into the newly created Madeleine Fund, raising millions of pounds. Celebrities and public figures pledged support. High-profile names like J.K. Rowling and Richard Branson contributed. With these resources, the McCanns were able to hire private investigators, media consultants, and lawyers to run what effectively became a parallel investigation alongside, and sometimes in spite of, the official one. But visibility came at a cost. While many admired their determination, others questioned their motives. Critics asked why parents under suspicion should control millions in public donations. Every press appearance was dissected. Were they grieving parents or public figures orchestrating an image? The very thing that kept the case alive also fueled endless waves of criticism. For Kate and Jerry, however, there was no choice. If they stayed silent, the world might move on. If they kept speaking, they risked judgment. It was a cruel balancing act between hope and scrutiny, one they endured day after day. Kate later confessed that each media appearance was not about image, but survival, a desperate attempt to keep the search for her daughter alive. Behind the spotlight, the toll was immense. Their marriage strained under the weight of suspicion and constant public exposure. They lived with guilt for leaving their children alone that night, for the suspicion cast upon them, for the gnawing fear that they had failed Madeleine. And yet, through every headline, every rumor, and every accusation, they held on to one unshakable truth. She was still their daughter, and they would never stop searching. For more than a decade, the case seemed to be drifting without direction. Leads went cold, theories multiplied, and public attention came and went in waves. Then, in June 2020, a dramatic development reignited the investigation. German authorities announced they had identified a prime suspect in Madeleine's disappearance, Christian Brückner, a convicted sex offender with a long criminal history. Brückner was a German national born in 1976, known to police in multiple European countries for crimes ranging from theft and drug trafficking to violent sexual assaults. His past was littered with arrests and convictions, but it was his history of abuse that cast the darkest shadow. In 2005, just 2 years before Madeleine vanished, Brückner broke into the home of a 72-year-old American woman in Portugal's Algarve region. He tied her up, beat her, and raped her before disappearing into the night. Years later, DNA evidence linked him to the crime, and he was convicted in Germany. What tied him so chillingly to the McCann case was not just geography or criminal record, but technology. Investigators revealed that Brückner's cell phone had been traced to Praia da Luz on the night of May 3, 2007. within meters of the McCann's apartment and during the exact time window when Madeleine disappeared. It was the first piece of concrete evidence placing a known predator in the immediate vicinity of the crime. Witnesses later came forward, adding disturbing context. An acquaintance recalled Brückner boasting about abducting a child in Portugal. Others reported that he had made grotesque remarks about children in the past, showing clear patterns of deviant behavior. Combined with his transient lifestyle, living in a camper van, drifting across borders with fake IDs and stolen identities, he fit the psychological profile of a predator who could strike and vanish without a trace. In May 2023, police launched a large-scale search at a remote reservoir, a place Brückner was known to frequent. Heavy equipment dug through the soil, pumps drained sections of water, and forensic teams sifted through debris. Items were recovered: cloth fragments, bones later identified as animal remains, and unidentified fibers. Speculation soared, but no conclusive link to Madeleine was ever made public. As of mid-2025, Brückner remained in a German prison, serving time for his 2005 rape conviction. Yet a new storm was building. Legal technicalities and sentence reductions meant he could be released as early as September 2025. The idea that the prime suspect in one of the world's most haunting child disappearances could walk free sent shockwaves across Europe. For Madeleine's family, it reopened wounds that had never healed. Prosecutors claimed they were still building their case, but time was running out. Without a body, without conclusive forensic evidence, and without airtight witness testimony, securing a conviction seemed agonizingly out of reach. And the thought lingered: if he had taken Madeleine, what would stop him from doing it again once released? For investigators and for the McCanns, Brückner was more than a suspect. He was a symbol of failure, of how borders, legal systems, and bureaucracies could allow a predator to slip between cracks while a little girl's fate remained unanswered. Just when it seemed the case could not grow more complicated, another twist emerged in 2025, one that shocked both investigators and the public. Reports revealed that a former German criminal police officer had personally paid a large sum of money to reduce Christian Brückner's prison sentence by more than 100 days. The revelation ignited outrage. Why would a figure once entrusted with upholding the law intervene to help a man suspected of abducting and possibly killing a child? Her explanation only deepened suspicion. She claimed she believed the fines imposed on Brückner were unfair, arguing that his insulting behavior toward prison staff should not justify additional penalties. But the reasoning felt weak, almost absurd, given the gravity of the crimes tied to his name. The woman was not a complete stranger to the case. Years earlier, she had been involved in placing surveillance equipment in Brückner's prison cell, part of the ongoing investigation to monitor his activities. That meant she knew his history, his background, and his link to Madeleine's disappearance. For many, her later decision to assist him financially blurred the line between professional duty and personal involvement. Was she protecting him out of sympathy, manipulation, or something more? The intervention raised alarming questions about the integrity of the justice system. Could Brückner have allies within law enforcement? Was this a sign of corruption, incompetence, or personal entanglement? Critics warned that if someone inside the system was willing to bend rules for him, then the case might be compromised far beyond what was already suspected. For the McCanns, it was another devastating blow. The idea that the prime suspect could be given even a sliver of protection by those meant to ensure justice was almost unbearable. If Brückner were released early and later found guilty, could the system ever regain credibility? Legal experts cautioned that such interference might complicate any future prosecution. If new evidence came to light after his release, courts could face insurmountable challenges in securing a conviction. And worse still, if Brückner slipped into the shadows again, authorities might never have a second chance to bring him to justice. This episode revealed a darker truth. Sometimes justice is not only threatened by the guilty, but also undermined by those entrusted to enforce it. For a family already drowning in uncertainty, the notion that an insider's actions could tilt the scales in favor of the suspect made the path to truth feel more impossible than ever. Nearly 18 years have passed since the night Madeleine McCann disappeared from apartment 5A in Praia da Luz. In that time, the case has become one of the most infamous unsolved mysteries of our era, a haunting blend of tragedy, suspicion, and systemic failure. Despite endless headlines, multiple investigations, and a named suspect, there is still no body, no conclusive evidence, and no justice. For Kate and Jerry McCann, the years have been a relentless cycle of hope and despair. Every new lead, every announcement, every claimed sighting has brought a flicker of possibility, followed by heartbreak. They have endured suspicion, endured criticism, and endured the unimaginable pain of waking each day not knowing whether their daughter is alive or dead. And yet, they continue to fight, not only for Madeleine, but for the principle that no child should simply vanish without accountability. The case has also laid bare troubling truths about the systems meant to protect the innocent. From the botched initial response in Portugal to the procedural delays in Britain and the legal entanglements in Germany, at every stage the investigation has stumbled. Critical evidence was lost in the first hours, international cooperation was fractured, and the man who may hold the answers, Christian Brückner, now stands on the brink of freedom. If he walks out of prison without facing charges in Madeleine's case, it will not just be a failure for one family, it will be a failure for justice itself. Yet the story of Madeleine McCann is more than a tale of loss. It is a reminder of the fragility of truth in a world of speculation, the weight of parental love in the face of unimaginable grief, and the urgency of demanding more from the institutions that exist to protect us. For every parent, her disappearance is a chilling echo of their deepest fear. For every society, it is a call to ensure that systems of justice cannot be bent, delayed, or distracted into silence. Madeleine's face, once just the image of a smiling 3-year-old girl on holiday, has become a global symbol, not of celebrity, but of absence, of vulnerability, and of a question that remains unanswered. What happened to her? Until the truth is known, until the person responsible is held accountable, the world will carry that question like a shadow. For her family, for the countless children who need protection, and for the principle that justice must never be abandoned, one demand remains as powerful today as it was in May 2007. Never forget Madeleine McCann.